Hello everyone, welcome back to today's video. My name is Ajoajaman and today we'll be discussing CELPIP Speaking Task 8, which is the final speaking task in this test. What is CELPIP Speaking Task 8? Task 8, also known as describing an unusual situation, is often the one that catches candidates off guard because it requires a mix of descriptive precision and quick thinking. Essentially, you are looking at a picture of a strange object or a bizarre scene, and you have to describe it to someone who can't see it and is usually a friend or family member so they can help you with the task. So it's not just about describing the image, it's about thinking and speaking logically under pressure. In this task, no memorization is required. You must think and speak naturally. Now that we understand what this task is about, let's look at why so many people actually struggle with it. Most candidates struggle with this task because the images are not always straightforward. They are often strange or symbolic, which can confuse you at first. Also, you cannot memorize answers for this task, so everything else becomes spontaneous. And since it comes at the end of the text, you may already be tired, which makes it even more challenging. Because of this pressure, understanding the timing becomes extremely important, which we'll be looking at in the next slide. In this task, you only have 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. That means you don't have time to overthink. You need to organize your ideas quickly within that 30 seconds and start speaking immediately. Also, you should avoid long pauses because that will affect your fluency score. So with such limited time, what exactly are you expected to include in your response? Let's look at that in the next slide. In this task, you are expected to do 4 things clearly. First, you would have to describe the unexpected situation to your friend. You would have to describe it clearly so that they can imagine what you are saying. Second, you have to explain what you think might be happening in the situation. Third, interpret the meaning of the situation as well logically, and then finally predict what could happen next. If you miss any of these parts, your score will drop. Now that the requirements are clear, let's focus on what examiners are actually listening for from candidates. Examiners are looking for clear and organized ideas. They want to hear smooth and natural speech, not something memorized. Your explanation should make sense and your vocabulary should be strong but natural. Most importantly, they want to see confidence and control in your response. To meet all these expectations, you need a simple structure you can rely on. The easiest way to succeed in this task is to follow a simple structure. Start with a general introduction, then describe key details, explain what the situation might mean, and finally, make a prediction. If you follow the structure every time, you won't get stuck. Now let's talk about how to quickly identify what really matters in the image. During this task, don't try to describe everything you see in the image. Focus on the main idea and the most obvious contrast. Identify the main element that makes the situation outlandish and then select only the important details. Also avoid over-describing everything. Once you identify that, everything else becomes easier to explain. Let's see how this would appear in a real exam situation. Now, here's what a typical exam question would look like. You are making a phone call to a friend to describe a bizarre painting you just saw at a local art gallery. Describe the painting in as much detail as possible. Explain what makes the scene unusual and why it caught your attention. So here you are asked to look at the image, describe what you see, explain what is happening, and say what might happen next. So you can already see how the question matches the structure we have discussed so far in the previous slides. Let's take a look at a response structure that can qualify you a CLB 9 to 12. In this task, you are always going to see a picture of a strange object or a bizarre scene, and you have to describe it to someone who can see it and is usually a friend. As you look at this image, the first thing you should notice is the strong contrast. There is a river running through the middle of this image, and it clearly separates two completely different seasons, which make the situation very, very unexpected. So what exactly makes this image unusual? And that is what you have to include in your response, which we'll be looking at in the next slide. For task 8, describing an unusual situation, the opening is crucial because it sets the informal but descriptive tone the graders or examiners are looking for. Since the task usually involves calling a friend to describe something they can't see, you want to sound natural yet urgent. Here is one distinct way to kick off the conversation with your friend that can guarantee you a CLB 9 to 12. Hey Chelsea, you won't believe this outlandish painting I'm looking at right now at the Pearson Art Gallery. The image appears to show a very unusual natural scene where a river is dividing two completely different seasons. Why does this opening work? It does because it establishes a relationship between you and your friend. That is where you are and speaking over the phone. Let's move to the body. After the opening conversation, a lot of students struggle to transition into the details. I will always recommend using the visual map to keep the description organized. So let's move to the body. On the left side, I can see a winter environment with snow covering the ground and several bare trees in the background, which suggests a cold and quiet atmosphere. In contrast, the right side also shows a much warmer setting with green grass, colorful flowers, and full trees, indicating a spring or summer season. Also, the river nestled in the middle seems to act as a boundary between these two environments, and what's really trippy is the sky. It transitions from a pale icy blue on the left to a golden warm atmosphere on the right. It is interesting because in reality, seasons do not exist side by side like this. So this image appears to be symbolic. It seems that this scene could represent a transition between seasons or possibly the contrast between two different climates. It might also symbolize change or the passage of time. Moving to the conclusion, that is, let's give it a reasonable wrap up. The task 8's conclusion should never be abrupt. It should bring the conversation back to the friend and the unusual situation you established in the beginning of your conversation. So, for example, looking ahead, it is likely that the winter side may gradually melt and transform into the warmer environment, creating a more balanced and unified landscape. Or you can also say, anyway, it's such a strange concept to see snow and summer flowers in one frame. Does that sound like something you would like to be in your hallway, or is a bit too out there? Why does this structure score a CLB 9 to 12? 1. You have the organization. The visual map prevents you from rambling when giving this response. Also, you have the tone. The conclusion reinforces that this is a conversation and not just a list of objects. And then you have precision. You have moving from bizarre, that is opening, to juxtaposition in the body to unique, that is in the closing, shows a wide range of vocabulary. Now let's move to the next slide, which is going to give us an advanced vocabulary cheat sheet we can use for tasks in CELPIP Speaking Task 8. To hit a CLB 10 to 12, students must move beyond nice and pretty to words that describe texture, atmosphere, and spatial relationships. Here is a curated list of advanced vocabulary specifically categorized for Task 8, describing an unusual situation, using our landscape image as the primary example. So, for example, if you want to describe unusual scenes, you can use words like bizarre, outlandish, crazy, peculiar, strange, etc. When describing objects or people, you can use words like vibrant when describing a color, ornate, steady, compact, etc. When describing spatial or positioning places, you can use words like in the foreground, background, on the left side, directly in front of, hovering above, in the distance, etc. When making a speculation or a guess, you can also use words like it appears to be, it looks as if, it resembles, etc. And when you want to use action verbs, words like appears, resembles, stands, hangs, showcases, etc. can be used for your description. Let's look at common mistakes that students usually make during this task in the next slide. For Task 8, the mistakes usually aren't about English level alone. They are often about strategy and spatial awareness. So, for example, many students simply list objects they see. They would say, I see a tree, I see snow, I see flowers, there is a river. The mistake here is failing to use a visual map. How can you fix this? You would have to use spatial transitions like in the foreground, directly behind that, or moving our gaze to the right. You would need to paint a picture for someone who is not available or who is not present with you. Then we have another mistake students usually make, which is ignoring the unusual element. The text here is titled Describing an Unusual Situation for a Reason. So you'd have to make sure that in your description, it sounds very unusual. So the mistake students usually do here is describing it as a normal image without acknowledging the bizarre effect. What can you do to fix it? You would usually have to use the comparison and contrast language immediately when you start with this response. Words like this defies logic, this is unreal, this is inexplicably, these are the words you can use to show that the situation is unusual. Also, some students often start too formally like an essay. In this picture, there is a painting. No, you are forgetting the situation is informal because you are talking to a friend. How do you fix this? You would have to start with a natural hook, as we've discussed in the previous slide. Hey, you won't believe what I'm looking at. This sounds like a real person talking to a friend and not a textbook. Another mistake students usually make is using too vague words like good, nice, big, or pretty. These are grade 5 level adjectives. To be able to hit that CLB 9 to 12 score, you would have to replace these adjectives with words like vibrant, lofty, and the rest, like we've done in the previous slide. And also, the last mistake students usually do is ending the conversation abruptly without circling back to the friend. So, for example, if you are talking to your friend about the image, you can end it by saying, anyway, I'll send you a photo later so you can see what I mean. Catch you later. This actually finishes your description very beautifully. Now let's move to smart preparation strategies you can do to earn you a CLB 9 to 12. The 30-second preparation time is the make or break moment for Tax 8. Most students waste it by trying to write full sentences, which is impossible. Instead, you should focus on a visual mapping strategy. So the first thing you would have to do is to identify the main scene, what is happening overall, and then how to call your friend. And then the second thing you have to do is to choose 2 to 3 key details that make the image unusual. Focus on that part. It's very important. And also think of 1 or 2 explanations on why you think the situation is bizarre. And then you follow it with a prediction. Make it very logical what you think will be happening next with the unusual situation happening. This is how you plan in the 30 seconds you have before you start with your 60 seconds response. Now let's go to the final pro tip you will need to score the CLB 9 to 12. Finally, to hit those top scores in CELPIP Speaking Task 8, remember to stay calm. These strange images are designed to challenge you, but if you follow our structured 4-step approach, the hook, the bridge, the body, and the wrap-up, you will stay on track every time. Focus on using both descriptive and speculative language to show off that CLB 9 to 12 vocabulary, and don't stop talking until the timer runs out. Even if you have to describe the lighting or frame, keep that momentum going. Ultimately, prioritize clarity and organization over perfection. Your goal is to help the listener see the image even though they are not present with you. Thank you for joining me throughout this entire CELPIP Speaking series. I hope these strategies give you the confidence you need to ace the exam. In our next video, we'll be diving deep into sample speaking questions and proven templates to help you secure those high CLB scores. See you there. Bye.